You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
Veteran Etc. This episode, we're honored to have Brian Delate. Brian is someone who's inspired me, well, especially after I got back from Iraq and I saw a play he produced, he created, he wrote, called Memorial Day. A true contribution to veteran culture and the culture of readjustment. On this show, we engage veteran culture and the culture of readjustment. All of our guests are major contributors towards the veteran way, the veteran life, the veteran books, the veteran movies, plays, the different things that make us stay up at night, the different things that inspire us in the morning. So Brian will share some of his life. I just want to ask him because he's got so many things, not just as a veteran, but like in so many other areas of acting, of really acting, of really being a warrior on stage, on the screen. And so, Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here. Good to be with you.
Thanks. And can you share with folks here a little bit about yourself and how you connected your veteran existence, your warrior existence with your craft?
Yeah. I'll give you the short version of how I got to the Army, which was I grew up in Pennsylvania. And my dad was a World War II veteran. I mean, he was a mystery then. I would figure it out later after my own experience, and even after that. So yeah, it was like a regular middle class upbringing. My dad, unfortunately, was a kind of a, he was a heavy drinker and like I say, kind of mysterious. I mean, I loved him. We had some good connections in ways that came along later. I didn't do well in school initially. I had a reading problem, and I was a hyper kid. I just didn't know how to behave in groups. Even at 5 years old, I was getting in trouble for like just spacing out and all that kind of stuff as a kid growing up. And so I was behind. And back in those days, the 50s, my grandmother, who was an elementary school teacher, said, "Oh, that he would really help him if he could stay back a year." And my parents were just too prideful with all that, so they were like, "No, he'll catch up eventually." They were right, but it would take another 20 years. So I ended up going through school, and I was pretty good with things with athletics. I played all the sports, and then my parents started to prosper, I guess, in junior high school, and we moved to a nicer house and all that stuff, and it was more vacation time and that kind of thing. And I mean, one of the things my dad did do for me was he got me a little sailboat, which was just a sunfish thing, but I would spend hours on it. And I think that was my first unknowing meditation routine, because I did like being with the light and the air and the water and everything. But anyway, I got through high school barely, and This was in the 60s. I got out of high school in 67. The war was almost at its height. And I wasn't paying attention. I thought, oh, this thing's going to be over with. You know, I won't get drafted. And I knew I wasn't going to college because I barely got out of high school. I worked in a record store, and I was crazy about the music at the time. And I had a girlfriend, Carol, who was wonderful, and we were in love, et cetera, et cetera. And then I got my draft notice in the spring of '68, and I didn't want to go, and I thought, this isn't. Even my dad, who was a World War II veteran, pretty conservative guy, he said, like, I'm not sure if this one's for us, or something like that. And I look back on that now, and it was like, which surprised me. Anyway, so that summer of '67, out of high school.
Can I stop you here?
Yeah.
Because what you said is very powerful. My dad said that to me about Iraq and Afghanistan. So just to let the audience know, Brian is speaking prophecy here. I feel the same way. I get triggered when I hear all the new wars, and I think about my son, because it's going to be 4 more years or so where he's going to be eligible for 5 more years. And the way we've been running things, it just seems like we're in this constant state of war. So I interrupt you because that is something that you don't hear about in a lot of narratives. So thank you for saying that.
Sure, you bet. Well, and interestingly enough, in the summer of '67, right after high school, my dad was a tennis guy too. As much as everything else, he was into the tennis world locally around Trenton, New Jersey, and in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And he played tennis with this guy who was at Rider University, where I would end up going later after the Army. But that summer, you know, he said, well, if your son can come here and get a C in 3 courses, a C in each one, we'll make him a full-time student in the fall, and he'll get a deferment, student deferment. Well, I didn't do that. I didn't even come close. And so I worked at this record store. The warning comes like around your birthday. So I turned 19. It's like, okay, we're going to come and get you soon, kind of thing. And I tried to join the National Guard or the reserves or something like that. It's nobody wanted to go to Vietnam. And but then that summer I got drafted, and I, you know, there were guys I knew who were just doing anything to get into college or to go to Canada, which I would never do. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And I went in August of '68, and I just said, hey, let's go, let's get this moving. So I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for basic training. And, you know, I thought, I'm here, I'm going to do the best I can. And the great thing about the service for me at that point in time before the war was to be in a structure. And I would hearken to that later when I went to college and other things in my life where I noticed that if you give yourself over to whatever the structure is and you do the best you can, whether it's school or the military or the arts, there's a good chance that you're going to do as well as you can. And in my case, I didn't even know I had leadership skills. I was the only squad leader who made it through the whole cycle. And then I got this one lieutenant and this and our head platoon or company sergeant they were like, you know, would you consider OCS? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And that's a long story. I'm not going to get into that now, but I did start to follow that. I even passed the board, but then I didn't want to go to infantry. I just did not. I wanted to learn something. I was like skillless, and I didn't want to. I thought they had this thing called what's it called? Combat engineering at Fort Belvoir, which I wanted to do that, but because of my school grades in high school, and they were changing it to only college grads at that time, so that went out the window. Anyway, I ended up going from there to Virginia for AIT, and then I went to Vietnam, and I was in Vietnam for pretty much most of '69, 2 months of 1970, and I had a I call it a 3-part tour. I was not trained as a helicopter door gunner,
Mm.
but I kind of said yes when they said, "Would you like to do an OJT on this?" And I had been trained in this helicopter. I don't know what the hell, I forget what it was called, helicopter stock control and accounting or something like that.
Mhm.
Anyway, I started to do the OJT on the helicopters, and it was scary. Sometimes it was totally boring. We were just like dropping off beer and socks to these guys out in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes it got really dangerous. But I only did that. I didn't do that for maybe 6 weeks, and then the guy who was the armorer and supply sergeant wanted, they needed somebody to help him because they were supposed to have like an E6 or an E7 in that position. I was a Spec 4. I was there. They said, no, you're going to go over and do this for a while. You can come back later. And I kind of didn't care because I was like, okay, whatever they want me to do, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I went in and I got involved with this E6 sergeant, and I was working for him for about a month or 5 weeks or something like that. And he was rotating out, and there was nobody else to be the supply sergeant armorer for the company, for this helicopter company. And he said to the major, this guy Brian should do it. So all of a sudden they're sticking stars and stripes on me, and they go, this is what you're going to do now. I said, but I've only been here, I don't blah 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 blah. And they said, no, this is what you're going to do. And I did that for I think the next 6 months, and it just burned me out. And we were, I would say, I mean, we got rocketed probably. Sometimes it would be every day for 3 or 4 days, and then we wouldn't get anything for 5 or 6 days. And of course, you never know where they're going to land. And so in my case, I went from starting into a combat scenario with helicopters, going into a rear echelon situation, and then I just felt like I didn't know what I was. I wanted to be. I didn't feel like I was a part of my own unit. So they had these units of nighttime perimeter patrol and listening posts they would set up outside the perimeter. And so I volunteered for it. And little did I know that because I was an NCO, they were going to give me a squad of infantry guys. Well, that was the last 2.5 months of my tour of duty. And there would be nights, and it was always at night. So we would go set up claymores, trip flares, all that stuff, just as it would get dusky, and then we'd sit in these positions, and that was amazing because there were some guys, or a couple guys that I were with, who they didn't want them in the field anymore. They were too crazy, and I could see why. And there was one guy, and I don't even remember his name because we didn't see each other that much in the daylight. We would see each other as the day was getting to an end. But I had most of the same guys for that couple of months, and so that's where some of my brush with combat came into play, where we had to catch these what would they call them? It's like they're the NVA's version of a commando, sappers, and that was our job, was to somehow make sure they didn't get in, or we could catch them or kill them or whatever, and like I say, this one guy, I'll never forget, we were setting up and he came over and he said, don't look now. I said, what do you mean? He said, they're watching us. I said, what? And he said, they're watching us, I'm telling you. I said, can you see him? He said, no, but I'm telling you, they're watching us. He says, let's move all this stuff. The second it gets dark, let's move everything. I said, okay, all right. Something told me to believe him. And we did. And sure enough, that night, 3 of them were trying to come in, and they thought they came in where we were, not where we were set up. Yeah. And we caught one of them. We killed one of them, and the other 2 got away. But it was and then in that, I had about a month to go, and I was out with a special forces unit, and I thought it was going to be like this cake duty where we're near the Cambodian border and we were setting up what are they called? Uh, things for fuel bladders for helicopters. We dig these sort of square trenches that they put these big 1,000-gallon jet fuel bladders in. And I was out there for a week, and I was going back and forth. And the last night I was there, we got hit and almost overrun. And there happened to be a couple of helicopters nearby, thank God, or I don't know what would have happened. But that put the fear of God in me in a different way, because I did a couple crazy things that night with just getting some ammunition for the one bunker we had. The guy didn't have, he only had like 3 belts of machine gun, M60 machine gun fire, so ammunition. So anyway, I did that, and then the last 2 weeks I was there, I was basically on the beach drinking beer and smoking grass, and that was it. I came home, and this is the stuff that, like, you and I've talked about, which was, I didn't know that I'd been forever changed. You know, I mean, one of the things that was hard to process as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old it was terrible to see people get hurt. It was a bummer to drag around body bags. So, I mean, I did all that stuff, but the worst part was to watch their minds start to melt, and right in front of you, you know. And it was like, and everything I tried to put aside. And when I got home, because I thought, I'm back home, I'm going to be normal again. You know, I still had a few months to do in the Army, which luckily I got to do in New Jersey. And there's actually a funny story with that, because I didn't know where I was going to go. I made a deal with this guy at division headquarters. He wanted like a 45, sunglasses, some boots, and jungle fatigue, all this shit. I got him all this stuff. And he said, where do you want to go? I said, the Northeast. I just want to finish my time and, you know, get out of the Army. He said, no, where do you want to go? I said, well, New Jersey? He goes, yeah, which one? Which place? You want to go to Fort Monmouth or Fort Dix? I said, I don't care. Whatever one's like. So I ended up going to Fort Monmouth. And anyway, so that year back was a monster. It was, I didn't know, my girlfriend was kind of like feeling distant from me. I scared her. I sure didn't want to. I scared my parents. I was getting into trouble with in the bars and all that stuff, and I really felt like it was me against the world. And so that year was terrible. I got into a really bad. I wasn't 21. I tried to pass off my military ID, because in those days I was a big kid, so it had your picture. And there was no other form of ID that did that. It had my picture on it, and underneath it was the day and the month you're born, and they put the year you were born on the back. So if you showed us to some guy who doesn't know, and you're being really confident, and you just whip it out. I did that in this bar in Pennsylvania. I was buying a 6-pack of beer, and he knew how to read it. He looked at it and he got mad at me, threw it at me, and I went into a rage and got into a terrible fight. And the guy, the policeman, he was a state trooper. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't been drinking that day, but I went into like a blind rage, and there was like 3 or 4 of them. And, you know, I mean, it's not like the movies where it's like, you know, the Vietnam vet who knows martial arts or something like that. I was just throwing chairs and going crazy. And so I'm sitting in the back of a cop car, and the guy says to me, you know, when'd you get home? I mean, I didn't know how he knew. When'd you get home? I said, a couple of weeks ago. He said, you know, you're in trouble, and you're still in the military. And I said, well, okay. Oh, like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I'm gonna try and help you out. He said, the owner wants you charged with assault and battery. I'll take you in for disorderly conduct, but you come back next week with me and you apologize to him and you pay for damages. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And he's what I would call a guardian angel. This piece I was mentioning beforehand that I'm working on now is what that's called. It's called Guardian Angels. And there were some of these real life guardian angels. The next one came when I finished my time in the Army and I went to college, and I knew if I didn't get my reading problem corrected, I was doomed. And so I took a course with this guy over the summer before I started my first semester, and he took me through a 3-part reading course, and everything changed. I felt like Helen Keller when she learns that language. I mean, it was like I had a new pair of glasses, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, and again, I'm in another structure. And I thought, well, I had a good work ethic in the Army, you know, and this is, if I bring my work ethic to this structure, you know, I think I got a shot. And I did. I went through my first year. I actually thought about doing pre-med because I even did well in math. I flunked math every year in high school. I had this teacher who, well, I told him the first day, I said, I have to take your algebra class. And I don't really, this is not my thing. Math is not my thing. And he was one of these guys. He had like 5 degrees in mathematics. And he said, oh, no. He said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. Now you know what you do? You come to my class, you come to my office the next day or after class, and we're going to go over whatever we did. I got an A in algebra. I took him again for trigonometry and analytical geometry, and I got a B. And then I thought, I'm taking this guy for calculus, and I'm going to be a pre-med major. I go to get him for calculus the beginning of my sophomore year, and his class is full. I went to him and I said, Dr. Kaplan, there's no way I'm taking any math class without you. You are my guide. And he said, well, just get me next semester. So I thought, okay, I'll go back to registration. And I said, what can I do? And they said, you know, you've taken all these requirements. You can pick an elective now. I said, like what? They said, well, there's this thing called Acting 101. You could try that. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I'll try that. You know, so I go into this acting class, and I was scared to death. It was the first class that scared me a lot more than the mathematics class. And bless, there were all these girls there. It was like, holy cow. So and that guy, interestingly enough, 2 weeks into it, and we became friends long after that for many years. And he pulls me aside. He says, you know, you should drop out. I'm going to fail you. I said, I like this class. Why would you do that? He said, well, you don't get up and work. I said, well, I will eventually. I just like to watch right now. He goes, you can't do that. I said, well, okay, what do you want me to do? And he handed me a 1-page monologue from the musical play called You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And he gave me this speech of Snoopy going up in his doghouse to fight the Red Baron. He said, come back with this memorized next week and do it, or just don't come back. So I memorized it. I didn't know what I was doing. And I went in there to do my best dog machine gunner, you know, and I don't know. They were laughing, and I thought, are they laughing at me, or what are they doing here, you know? But I got hooked, and then I got into the next play they put up, which was a melodrama. It was kind of a comedy. And then I switched majors. And then I moved from Bucks County Community College.
Mm-hmm.
I finished there in the spring of '73, and I transferred to Rider College, where, one thing to mention, Rider College, I did those 3 courses in '67. This dean was very nice. And he said to me, Brian, you understand that you're just not college material, right? I said, yeah, I tried to tell my dad that too. So anyway, I ended up going back to Rider. I go back to Rider, and now I'm a theater major. And I finished at Rider in '75. And also the play you saw, Memorial Day, I took it back there in 2016 to do it there. And I'm going there for an award this fall too, which, I mean, I've gone full circle with both colleges. It's kind of thrilling.
I think that was that also the time I was really captivated by the speech, you know, and I was gonna have you on another project I was working on, but that kind of dissolved. But I was like, I gotta get him, because you really presented that well. Was that at Rider, or was that at this St. Crispin's.
Oh, the Crispin Day speech. Actually, they had me out. They brought me out. I had these watercolors. My late wife, Karen, who died in 2016, a couple of years beforehand, she had seen these snapshots I had from Vietnam, and they weren't like anything great. There was some things from a helicopter, one, and one of me cleaning a pistol or something like that. And she made these watercolors out of it. And when I was out here, I moved out here after that. And the gal I was with here for a couple of years, she had gone to Ryder with me, and she helped me find a place because I wanted to get a home for them. There were 8 of them, and I wanted them to be someplace where I knew they would be for, ever. And she talked to this guy at Ryder University, and she said, one of your graduates, the guy I'm with, has these watercolors, and he's looking for a home. And this guy he was running the continuing education something with veterans. And he said yes. And then somehow he brought it up, and he said, you do a play too, right? I said, yeah. So when I went to hand off the watercolors to him and this other professor, they said, would you consider bringing the play to Ryder? I said, yeah, sure. I said, we need a little budget because, everybody's in California. And he said, no problem. And they took care of everything. It was pretty wonderful. We did it for 2 nights at the school, and it was pretty marvelous. It was really a real icing on the cake for my can I tell one more story about Ryder? Okay, so senior year. So anyway, so at Ryder, in my end of my junior year at Ryder, I applied for an internship at McCarter's Theater in Princeton.
Oh yeah.
University there. So I got 1 of 2 slots for a directing intern with a guy from Villanova, and so I went there for part of my senior year. I got, I don't know, 6 or 7 credits, and it was the thing was the beginning of my very last semester as a senior at Ryder, there had been some realignment with the administration and the faculty and the students about how to just sort of communicate better and with school and everything. So I was asked to be on a small committee with 2 professors, 2 deans, and 2 students, or maybe 3 students. And we were going to sit down and decide who was going to stay in college and who was going to go that were on probation. There were like 40 names. And I'm sitting there thinking, I was told I was not even college material, and I'm supposed to sit here now. And this one dean who I was friendly with, because we talked about classical music a lot, which I got into in college. And I said to him, Dean Iorio, I got to tell you, I said, I was here in '67 to try to be a student here. I didn't do it. I didn't cut it. The dean said to me, you're not college material. I said, has anybody talked to these students here? And he said, that's it. We stop right now. He said, until we hear from all the resident supervisors, we don't go any further. Thank you. And whatever. So I was like, wow, holy smokes. Anyway, that's me up and through till college, and then I moved to New York.
It's a great story. Yeah. That's awesome. And the thing with your play that really affected me was that it kind of has a physicality, it has a spiritual dimension, it has an emotional dimension. Memorial Day has a cognitive, intellectual, dynamic, creative. So what that was my take of kind of like some of the framing. But what I mean, hearing from the creator, can you say a little bit about that? Because that was very important through not just a lot of people, they don't realize I was in the military. I kind of had a odd life like you, and so I was in the military several times. So a lot of people just think it was just the time that I served during the time when I met you, around that period. But it was just important to really understand the play from many different levels, and it helped me understand my own physicality. And I'm sure many vets have gotten that, the many dimensions, because of the readjustment, the nature of readjustment being kind of holistic in the organic sense.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because um, you probably are maybe aware of this, but I didn't know until I started working with Dr. Tick, Dr. Edward Tick. When I started working with him, which I did a lot, he got me back to Vietnam 3 times. It was helpful to connect with the cultural ministers and all that stuff. he he really helped me to see that, like we were talking about before, like coming home, you don't know that you've been forever changed. And also the other thing too, in my case, which was that I think it was, there depends on the culture, but I know with the ancient Japanese samurai, they were not given their weapons until they mastered an art form, so that they could process battle into their art, whatever that was.
Yeah.
It could be flower arranging or
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
writing,
Yeah.
all that
Because
stuff.
because you've got to recognize that you're right, because that whole thing of regarding beauty, the irony of beauty, and you've got to accept your death and your life as it is, and at the same time there's something redemptive in that. So
And putting your energy, taking that sort of that dark energy and putting it into some, as you say, some form of beauty. I mean, so for me, it was kind of the reverse. It was like the art form came after the traumas and all that stuff. And where, I mean, first and foremost, well, here's what happened. I was underneath the first plane that hit the towers on 9/11. I was downtown with my friend Sister Bridget, who was this old nun I used to help out once in a while. And we were standing there in Tribeca, and here comes the first plane right over our heads. And the sound came first, and the plane had to be doing 300 or 400 miles an hour. And it was only 1,000 feet above us, and it sort of wiggled. The wings were going like this, and then bang, right into the North Tower. And it was like something was ignited in that moment. Not only was it like, holy, I just saw all these souls like disappear, but then it was like the next day, it was like my own story was forcing its way out in a way I wasn't expecting. And it wasn't too long after that I started to take just a story or two into the actor studio. And all these people that I really, held up in a pedestal, like Norman Mailer, Eli Wallach, Harvey Keitel, they all said, you have to keep doing this. You got to keep doing this. And then the one who really helped me with the sort of creating the play was Ellen Burstyn, and a couple of others there too.
Stop here. I got to stop you here, because what the audience doesn't know, and I'm speaking casually with Brian because our history goes back to when I returned, like around 2009 and 2010, something like that, and yeah, I returned, and then I spent a couple of years at the VA and working at the VA, and that's how I got connected with certain people who knew you, and I really just found you to be one of the more sincere people in our community. Not that we have a bunch of grifters, but I would just say, as my sister says, who's also a combat vet like us, they're going through their readjustment too. Don't be so harsh on them. And so I back off. I'm like, yes, sis, that's right. But the thing that you mentioned all these big names, and it's because you're also a big name. There's been projects even before I knew you that I noticed and part of this show, people don't understand when I talk about veteran culture and veteran readjustment. The veteran culture part is like veterans like Brian, who made an impact as a veteran in his field, and that's a contribution into veteran culture. But then veteran culture readjustment culture, that's dealing with more like something like Brian's contribution by creating the play, making impact for the community. Both are giving to the community, just in different expressions. And I know you're very humble, and but I wanted to ask you a little bit about the acting, the powerhouse acting. When I said powerhouse, I'm just saying, like major projects that you've been involved in, like Shawshank Redemption, like the Truman Show, Buffalo Soldiers, other, I mean, on and on and on and on. You've been involved in acting, high discipline, high devotion to the craft, warrior into the craft as a warrior, as a soldier deployed. What's that all about? And can you give us a little bit of history for our audience?
Sure. When I moved to New York in '75 after I finished college, I started to slide back to the year between Vietnam and college. I started drinking too much. There wasn't a structure to follow like school. Well, how do you do a career? I didn't know anybody. I mean, my uncle was there. He was in the music business, the classical music business. But anyway, I just was like, how do you do this? And then it was like all about survival. So I worked I worked as a bartender for, I don't know, 3 years, maybe more. And then there were couple guys I'd gone to school with who were actually breaking into the business. And I thought, I got to do this somehow, so I got fired from my last bar job, and that was it. I was like, I'm not making another drink for anybody again. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but because I got seduced by the money and the sort of people partying and all that stuff. And I mean, it all ran its course. And then it was like, okay, let's get serious. Let's get like you are back in school. So I started to work on things like solid monologues, and I started seeing more plays. And I auditioned at the Public Theater, which is a big deal in New York. And it took me a little bit of, I was just being pushy. I went into the sort of screening casting directors to give my picture and resume, because they have an open door policy. And they don't do it. They just take your picture. That's it. Oh, thank you for coming by. And I said, well, when do you have general auditions again? And they said, well, not for a few months. So I said, oh, okay. Well, I came back like a month later, and the woman was the same woman. She said, you've been here, right? And I said, yeah. I said, but things might change. Who knows? She goes, well, they're not going to change. It's not going to be for months and months. I said, okay, fine. I came back 6 weeks later, and she said, okay, I know who you are. She said, call me in 2 weeks, and maybe I'll let you audition for me, not the 3 head casting directors. I said, okay. And I was ready. I went in and I gave her a good, different Henry V monologue and a contemporary thing. And then she said, okay, she said, call me next week. I called her next week. Now we're getting into the spring. And then she said, okay, you're going to come in and you're going to audition for the 3 main casting directors. And they were getting ready to do the Shakespeare in the Park that summer. And I went in, and I was nervous, but I was ready. And then I got an audition to be in Henry IV, Part 1, with Des McAnuff directing and a whole bunch of stars. And I got a call back for that. And then I got cast, and I got to work with this guy, B.H. Barry, was the premier fight choreographer and stage combat guy at that time. And I didn't have that much of a part. I was moving stuff or doing fights and that kind of thing. And then they gave me another job, and the other play with Raul Julia was doing of the Tempest. And I understudied a couple of supporting actors in that. So all of a sudden, I'm a professional actor. Now, the guy, of course, who was the legend, Joseph Papp.
Yeah.
I thought, how do you get noticed by Joseph Papp? Well, there was a guy. his name was Tom Bird. He had a company called the Vietnam Veterans Ensemble Theater Company, and he was connected with Joe. And they were putting together a play for that fall. And he called up the casting people, and he said, are there any veterans that have come through there? And I said, yeah, we had this guy here. He did fine. And, we'll meet him, So I met him, got a part in that play. And then that's when Joe noticed me. And then he put me into the play he was directing of Hamlet. Like maybe a year later. Between that, I did another play, again, a small part, but I got my equity card with the David Ray play. And then I went back. See, after Hamlet, I did it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very good play. I had to be a polar bear. And I mean, I had to wear the bear suit and all that crap. And so that was embarrassing. Anyway, but that play, again, Joe saw it. And and then when this play Tracers, which was a big deal, it still gets done around the country. And Joe said to the guys who brought it in from California, he said, Brian Delate should do Little John. And they said, sure. And then I did Tracers for a year in New York and London. And then I got good agents. And then I didn't do my first TV movie until '87, but it was with William Friedkin up in Montreal. It was my first, made some money. And then I started doing commercials around that same time, which I didn't realize, because when I first started to try and get in the theater, I thought, oh, it's just theater. I'm not good. Well, you can't make a living. Right. You can get by.
Like my poetry. Brilliant, but I ain't paying stuff for my kid, I can't do that.
Yeah. No, I ended up I did a lot of commercials. I probably did 60 or 70 commercials over the years. And they built my pension up. They helped me with my health plan. And then I don't know when it was. I can't remember the dates are all out of my head. But I got to work with some really great people. I got to do some great parts in theater with the Phoenix Theater Company, River Arts. God, what else? I mean, it was that was it. And then the camera stuff started coming more later, late '80s, early '90s.
Okay. 90s. And how did you end up in these really, kind of like really these really big movies? I mean, your talent really comes up in them. I'm just wondering, how so far you've described everything that is very military and veteran, as far as trying to make promotion for me, trying to get somewhere. And you just described for all of you listening, if you can relate, by being in the military, Brian's got his hustle going on, and in a great positive way. And then you go into this higher level, about the highest level.
Well, there was a situation where when my daughter was born, 94, I'd done Shawshank. It hadn't come out yet, but then I was really concerned about money, and my wife was home with the baby. And I got lucky with a commercial I shot in Boston. And then I went in to do, I think my daughter was about 4 months old at the time, and I went in to do a day on a soap opera. And a friend of mine was one of the stars, and he was in my indie movie, Soldier's Heart. I went to see him and show him pictures of our daughter, etc. And we had a very meaningful exchange. I did my job that day. I left. I'm walking down the street, and I run into Debbie Brown, who's a casting director in New York. I don't know if she's still working, but she said, "Oh, what are you doing Monday?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, come in. I want you to meet this guy, Peter Hyams. He's going to direct the next Van Damme movie in Pittsburgh." I said, "Okay." So I went in, and one of the things I was trying to do at the time was I wanted to get in the room with whoever the main person was, the director or the producers or whatever, and just engage them if possible. Well, this guy, Peter Hyams, it turns out he was a photographer in Vietnam in like 64, 65. So I went in for a 5-minute interview. I was there for half an hour, and then I got this great job for 4 weeks or whatever it was, 5 weeks in Pittsburgh on this Van Damme movie, which the guy was a, megastar. So I
Yeah.
started to get a taste of residuals then after that, which was like, they're very comforting.
Yes, yes. The time period, I mean, those movies are still, he's still, he recreates himself every 5 years or every 10 years. He stays out and then he comes back. And so
Yeah.
those movies are cult classics. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a blast. And then it was I did an indie film the next year in Boston, which was a really positive experience. And then I guess it was that after I shot it in that summer of '96 or so, I went in to meet Peter Weir, who was going to direct the Truman Show.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I would try to do is know as much about him,
Mm.
whoever I was meeting, as possible. So I watched all his movies before I went to see him. I'd seen a couple already, but he had done this movie Fearless and a couple movies in Australia, The Year of Living Dangerously, and Gallipoli. And we talked about Gallipoli, which is a really remarkable film,
Yes.
that World War I movie. And it's again, the casting director said, now Peter might pick up the camera and put it on his shoulder and just start shooting you while you're talking, or he may throw an improvisation at you. So be ready. And you're only going to have 5 minutes.
Mm.
And again, I went in and I mentioned we got talking about his movies, and I talked about Gallipoli, and then I let him know I was a veteran, and he wanted to know about that. And then I had a couple of things ready to go, kind of improv wise, that were in the script, that were, hints at what could be in the script. And we did that, and I didn't find out for a couple of weeks, but then I got that part, and it was the first time I was ever bought out for a picture. So like the next 4 months, I knew what I was going to be doing. Even if I wasn't working, I was going to still get a check. It was absolutely remarkable. And I met some wonderful people. Laura Linney became a friend, and Noah Emmerich, and Jim Carrey. It was his first step into trying to do something a little more serious.
That's right.
And really positive experience. And God, it was pretty wonderful. I mean, that's the thing about, like, as a veteran and as an actor, like Buffalo Soldiers and shit, what's the other one? Now I'm blanking out on my own career. I
You've
just
got so many movies,
Oh
really.
no, I know what I was going to tell you. It was with the Aquila Theater Company.
Oh, that's
Peter
huge.
Kleinek and
Yeah.
Desiree, Peter and Desiree. I did a Heracles production with them. We came out here for a night to do it, and then we did it then we went to Greece, and we did it in Greece.
Wow.
We were there for like 3 weeks, and we did it like on the island of Syros. Then we did it at this University of Peloponnese, and then we also did it in Athens, which is the sort of finale thing. But I mean, that's the kind of thing where, and then Peter and Desiree would always ask me to sit with them for the talkbacks, to speak as a veteran and as an artist, and sort of, kind of draw lines between the play and.
Well, in regards to Heracles, let me interrupt you. What was your own tailored message to the audience, if you can remember what you were trying to share with them while you were there?
Well, I think, well, it was tricky with the Greeks because they didn't take well to one of their plays being put into a contemporary English and not, and we did it in a modern, kind of like, modern military attire and stuff like that. But one of the things that, I mean, I'd read some of this stuff in college, but I didn't realize how deep the passion was, how primal the passion was. The ancient Greeks were, a lot of those Greeks that we know, all of them had been in combat. A lot of them had been in combat.
Even Socrates, 4 times.
Yeah, Socrates. Yeah. Euripides. I mean, they knew their stuff, and like that. There's something about that primal passion to be able to be able to be bigger than life. You know, like that's like in Memorial Day, I had a drill sergeant character who was iconic, and like, you know, you would never sit around anyone's living room and talk like that. But you know that there's something about the way the Greek stuff, even translated into English, was calls for heightened emotional life, heightened emotional life. Your body's filled, and you know, that was something that I thought, wow, because there's something about the primal emotional pit of soldiers, as I understand it, that to bring that out of the dark and into the light is an incredible challenge. And you know, I don't think any of us can do it alone. I've always felt that way about the combination of spirituality and community as these contexts for these places for these things to come forth. And also I just believe that, which I had this encounter with many younger veterans, which was when they'd see the hat or something like that, and they'd say, oh, I was in Iraq or Afghanistan. And I'd say, have you shared your story? And there were many times where they said, I don't really have a story. And I would disagree with them as gently as possible. I said, no, you have a story. And there's going to be a time when you may want to tell it, or it's going to force its way out. And you want to be able to give it to someone you trust, because trust is an issue with a lot of veterans. And I got to tell you, Mike, there was one night we did a few nights at this little theater company, little black box thing on the Upper West Side called the Drilling Theater. And there was a guy who had been at this halfway house on 43rd Street he was transitioning out of the service for like 6 months. He didn't know if he was going to school or he was going to get a job or whatever. He came and saw one of the workshops of Memorial Day, and he said, I want to see this again. And he said, if my friend's in town who I was in Afghanistan with, I want to bring him. I said, great. I said, well, you'll come by, you'll see it, it'll be posted, or, you know, just hit me up with a phone call or whatever. And so he came with this guy. I met them for, oh, we'll say hello afterwards. I said, yeah, absolutely. We said hello afterwards. They had been in Afghanistan together. He calls me the next day and he said, we weren't 3 blocks away, and my friend stopped cold and said, I've been planning to kill myself for 3 months now. I don't know what to do. And they went to the VA. Now, at that time, I was kind of getting ready to walk away from Memorial Day because it was killing me financially. I mean, I made no money on it, and it took up a lot of time. It wasn't something I could just. I wasn't Mark Twain tonight. It wasn't like I'm going out and just telling stories. I had to go live in this thing, and but that was one of the most moving exchanges, because then I went, wow, okay, I guess I'm supposed to keep doing this, and I did. I kept doing it until 2016.
Stop. Yes, the play, you know, the deep waters, dark waters that you go in with Memorial Day, I think was very pioneering in regards to, you know, first of all, we've got a Vietnam vet doing this. There's Afghanistan, Iraq going on. I don't care about using this language, but you don't give a shit, and you just do this. I mean, you do it with care, but I mean, you don't give a shit as far as like, you're going to put the message through, you know, for the people. And it's good. It's great. It's fantastic, but it deals with all the stuff that we haven't really been able to engage with in these wars, because everything's so sanitized. Back in the Vietnam War, after there was some recognition happening in the 80s, there were some great critical movies like the one with Martin Sheen and Catherine Bates and Emilio Estevez, where the soldier comes back and readjustment issues come up. And there were a couple of those type of movies, you know, and then even war movies in the, you know, whatever, you know, view you have on them. Something like a Casualties of War makes you think about the moral dilemmas that many of us have had to deal with, whether on a micro level or on a macro level. You know, all of that disappeared with this this new war on terror, and I felt your piece Memorial Day was like a wake up call as far as like, boom, I'm gonna knock these people out with reality, and it did do that. Everyone, you presented the play where I saw it at one of America's historic theaters, Cherry Lane in the West Village, and there was not one person that came out of that theater. First of all, it was completely packed. That wasn't moved by the play, and I'm not jock riding you. I'm not that type of person. First of
Right.
all, I have a lot of issues, and this, and why I'll say I love you because I have a lot of issues with Vietnam vets because my dad's a rock infantryman, Republic of Korea Army, and a lot of his friends ended up in Vietnam. He was older, but he was in Korea. My I just the whole Asian thing. You were the only veteran that either one of the few Vietnam veterans, and I love Vietnam veterans. I'm just saying you're one that really tried to get to know me, other than the vet center vets that I worked with, who in Long Island, who just loved me, you know. And then other places they just kind of whatever, all these VSOs and all that, American Legion and VFW and all these groups, they kind of had that Asian, issue. I even tried to join American Legion and they told me to go to the Chinatown Post, and I found out the guy never even served in a war, bullshit like that. And, then I have a guy like Brian who helps me rework a lot of things regarding being Asian, also being a veteran and being proud. And he also doing that and sharing that mutual respect. And you just always being gracious to me and with other veterans and not preaching to the Iraq war veteran. I've seen you engage other Iraq war veterans and you don't preach to them. You treat them like they served with you. And
Yeah.
that's very powerful. That's a testament of who you are. That's why I truly remain close to you. And I had to get you on the show for people to hear and get into Memorial Day on some level. Check it out because read about it, check it out because it's reality. It's what veteran readjustment is all about. There's more, yes, etc. But I mean, you got to start somewhere. That's what I say. And Memorial Day is a great place to start.
Well, and there's I didn't mention it before. I forgot. We have most of the footage together from the development of Memorial Day at the Actor Studio to the trip to Hanoi and back.
Wow, yeah.
And it's just we just have to finish it. It's been too long.
Right, but you ended up, please, like in Heracles, you ended up going to Vietnam and you started, what's this thing? And please share with your audience because you know what I mean? I mean, it's bad enough you have a crazy hippie Korean Dominican guy, always, giving you, some kind of crazy idea, and then you actually go back. And so what, not that, you had any animosity or whatever, but still it's like me, if they ask me, do you want to go to Iraq? I don't know if I could say that I do want to go back to Iraq, so I don't know, but please, can you share?
Well, when Dr. Edward Tick came to see a workshop version of Memorial Day, first thing he said to me is, you should take this to Vietnam. And the first thing I said to him was, no way. This is not for them. This is for Americans. And he said, you'd be surprised. They're more curious about the American point of view now. So of the 3 trips, the first one was I went as a veteran. I wasn't going as an artist. But I did meet the cultural ministers and they were very curious. They said, can you send us the script? And there was someone there to translate it, of course. They had no objection. Oh, they wanted video also. They had no objections to the script, any of it. And I was like, wow, okay. They said the only thing we won't allow is you cannot wear a hat like this that says Vietnam veteran, because you are not a Vietnam veteran. We are the Vietnam veterans. I said, okay, fine. So I wore a 101st Airborne hat to play when I did it over there. And but that, that was pretty remarkable, because it was the first time there were just a lot of things came up. It was some of the hard wiring was going to finally loosen up after all the 3 trips. And the second trip was about setting it up. And also in the second trip, I got to go down to what was used to be South Vietnam and stand on the ground, some of the ground where I had been. And I still had this little bit of a knot about the people. And one of the great things about having a spiritual pursuit, because I got to spend some time with some Buddhist monks and nuns who I meditated with, and that was remarkable. But when I went down to where I had been, this guy helped me get a van, a translator, and a videographer to go from Da Nang, about an hour and a half south of there, or 2 hours, to where I had been. So I'm standing there, and it's just like weed trees, and there's nothing there. It's all gone. You'd never know anything was there. But kind of like some people say, like if you go to Gettysburg, there's a vibe there that's still there after all this time. And there was something going on in me, and I didn't know what it was, but I ended up I excused myself. I said I need to just be still for a couple minutes. So I went over and I got on my knees, and I didn't know if I was going to meditate or pray. I just wanted to be still. And the thing that came to mind was it was like a voice feeling that was of the guys who didn't get back, and they were saying, "We're okay, and so are you." And something shifted then, and I started to see the Vietnamese differently. I started to see their divinity. They didn't have to be a monk or a nun. They could just the women, men, children, whatever they were, and they were. That anyway, the shift took place. I was so grateful because that was the second trip. So when I went back for the third trip to work with the Vietnam theater, the North Vietnam Hanoi Theater Company,
Wow,
and their actress, who was she was marvelous, and also me catching up with the times. Her daughter was going to Penn State University. This is it's like I needed some translations. My daughter went to Bryn Mawr. I think it was her junior year. She was going, no, it must have been her sophomore year. Anyway, the hallway in my daughter's dorm, they would have the names of whatever students were in each room. And the next room down, I can't remember her name. And it tells you where they're all from. It said Hanoi, Vietnam. And her family came and saw the play. Yeah.
wow, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, holy moly. So it was that was pretty amazing. I feel pretty lucky that I've gotten to have that experience, and particularly, and there was one they wanted me to do like a 15-minute version at the university in Hanoi, and so I went into this classroom where there were like 150 kids, and kids are kids. And one kid said, my translator was really cool. She was Quia, and she said, "Oh, he says, do we have to hear about that war again?" So, because I mean, like 2/3 of the people born there were born after the war, or that lived there were born after the war. So I don't know. I'm extremely grateful.
I hear it. I hear it from my son, and it's the gap is even shorter, and he's like,
I was in the hospital in Da Nang with a ROK soldier.
Oh, okay.
We overlapped for a couple of days. He died, unfortunately, but that's you reminded me of that.
A lot of so a lot of I appreciate you presenting the ROK soldier in a vulnerable state, because usually I think they're mythologized by the media, by certain American veterans, not kind of like how I glorified the Gurkhas when I was in Iraq, and I met
Yeah.
them in Kuwait and stuff like that. But they had their own pain. I ended up in Nepal, and I learned a lot about that. And you humanize this rock troop, but you usually hear about rock troops as just being these savage killers who just ended up just going scorched earth and all this kind of stuff. But they've gone through the same issues as you regarding Vietnam. Agent Orange in Korea,
Yeah.
effects of Agent Orange on Korean war vets, the PTSD and the depression on Korean war vets. Vietnam war vets who were in Iraq. I've seen their violence just in social settings. It comes out as a kid when I was a kid, and the thing about it is that I guess what I appreciate you saying that is you universalized pain, the
Mhm.
soldier's pain. And that's very powerful, because usually, again, I hear these myths. I mean, it was true that they were sent there, and they were very thankful, to be there and everything. But a lot of them, they get they're misunderstood because they come from a warrior tradition, and
Yeah.
unlike certain Americans, American generals, not necessarily, the American generals influenced the lower ranks in Korea by saying Korean troops were shit. um they Right now there's a lot of history out there that's being exposed on the where it was the generals like General Aldman, who would just send a bunch of rock troops into have rock commanders send rock troops into suicide missions and things like that. And but there were also a lot of successful missions completed by Korean troops. It wasn't like the rock army in Korea was shit.
Oh,
That's why I appreciate you talking about it with me, because you have a history and I honor that. And I was born in Pennsylvania, even though I call Florida home. But I share something with you in that. And I'm American, and I share that with you. And my dad shares his pride, you know, and so we all do. And I just appreciate you because you give a lot of room for people to be who they are. I even remember you invited me once to do a little observance or talk about a play that you did, and I just remember you being very open to my comments. And
oh yeah.
well,
Yeah.
how do you get that understanding, and why do you think you haven't become some curmudgeon? Uh,
Oh, well, that's a good question.
I mean, I'm sure you're a curmudgeon in other ways, like I am, but
No, no, I've been,
yeah,
I've been, I just have, I have, yeah, I have a lot of hope. I mean, I think that, I don't know who said it, something about our wounds are precious.
mm,
And, I don't know who, it's not from me. I've heard it
yeah,
said. And
yeah,
there's truth to that, that like, and the wounds could be from war, they could be from, a terrible childhood or whatever. But there's something about like the opportunity we have in this time and space is that we can, we can transpose or transform those wounds. I mean, that's one of the things that I think I mentioned it before, is that I had this colossal dream in 1973, and one of the things that came out of it was this deep belief that has never left me, which is the possibility for transformation of the human spirit. And I mean, I still have shadowy things going on from time to time, but they're more manageable now.
mhm,
And I, like I said, having to be, I mean, that's the thing, like after 9/11, I really didn't pay that much attention. I wasn't looking at the commercial theater and the commercial film world in the same way. It was like something was over here. I needed to pay attention to what I was experiencing in my own recovery with PTSD, but also how do I put this to work? And I mean, I worked on a play called Salome with Al Pacino for off and on for a couple of years. I mean,
Yeah, that
while I
was.
doing all this stuff,
Mhm.
and so
Across that
I
one.
kept my toe in the water with all
Yes,
of that, but
right. But that's the extra work that uh you had to put in, and that's what I tell people with readjustment. If you put in that type of extra work, you're gonna see something. And gosh, I just I really look at you as someone that has really influenced me, and I know other vets and civilians. Um, do you have can you tell folks like how they can check out your present projects? Could you share some of your present work, and if they wanted to uh, engage any social media or anything, or like I just want like them to be exposed.
well, the only thing I don't have that much going on right now. I mean, like the entertainment stuff, most of
Yeah,
it's on
COVID and all.
I
Yeah,
am IMDb,
yeah.
Brian Delate on imdb.com,
Okay.
and then I've written a 8-episode series which has not been produced yet called Unknown Soldiers, and it's about soldiers coming home, men and women coming home, so that each story about a half hour each, and I drew some of it on my own experience and some of it having witnessed or been a part of it or whatever, and so that's with people in New York that are trying to make it happen, get a go of it, and um, that and and the play Guardian Angels, which is I haven't been able to put that out to the public yet. It's connected to Vietnam a little bit, but nothing like Memorial Day. It's more about after Memorial Day, if you will, for
Mhm.
me personally, and that's where even one of the lines in it is loneliness drives my life, but hope reigns supreme. And that's like, I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm 73, and I feel very fortunate that, I can walk and talk. I can still go to the gym.
Yeah.
I have a good social life. I have a good spiritual life. And my daughter's now, she's back in New York. She's 28 and she did her MFA out here. We're very close. And, and I live one day at a time, you know, that's it.
I hear you. I follow you on that. Tell us how folks can get connected regarding Memorial Day.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to be doing the play again.
Right, but on YouTube or on.
Not yet. We're going to get there.
Okay.
We have to finish the documentary,
Yeah.
but the documentary has a lot of the play in it,
Okay.
and so that's coming. I wish I could say I knew when.
But still, we'll keep you on. Another great reason to have you back on again. And I wanna continue the dialogue next time.
Okay.
Uh, and any last words for folks out there, for vets, for
Yes,
civilian.
actually, yeah. I mean, um, I put this in the documentary, and it's not something I invented. It's really comes out of a lot of different warrior soldier traditions, cultures, and that is if you have a veteran in your life um, that you want to build a trust bridge with, there's a great way to ask 4 questions. And her name was Kip. She was a friend of mine I knew in New York. She came to see Memorial Day and she was rattled afterwards, I think in a good way. And she said, my dad was at Iwo Jima as a medic. He's never spoken a word about it. He did become a physician. He's retired, living in Florida. He's 90 or whatever he was. And she said, I want to talk to him. And I said, here's what I suggest. And this is what I was going to mention. The 4 questions are, who were you before the service? Who were you in your training? Who were you in a combat arena? And who were you when you came home? Those 4 questions. So she went down to Florida to see her dad, and she popped one question after another. They spoke for 3 hours. He'd never spoken about any of this with her. She wrote an article about that and put it into Purple Heart magazine or whatever that website is. And they wanted to publish it, whatever. And she sent him a copy, and he said, oh, he was mad. He got mad at her for doing that. And then she called me up and she said, oh my God, my dad got mad at me for writing this article. I said, can you please send me his address? And I wrote him a handwritten letter, and I said, dear Dr. Ozzoni, you have no idea how much that article helped me as a younger veteran, blah, 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 blah. And he did a 180 on that. And he's like, okay, I'm glad it's out there, you know. But but as far as like, that's the kind of stuff where like something as simple as those 4 questions, there's a lot of people, a lot of civilians don't know how to talk to veterans. They just don't know what to do. They say, oh, thank you for your service. And it's like,
Did you kill anyone? You know, you know.
But again, those 4 questions are great ways, especially if it's like a brother or sister or mom or dad or husband or wife or whatever, good friend, cousin. Like that's a way to, and then also bring your best listening. Bring your best listening. If anything, somebody else said that too, which is listening is love, and there's just something to that. So I feel really lucky that that I've been able to cultivate a kind of listening where if there's a response and I can give one, I will try to do that. If I can't, I can't. But whatever. Mike, thank you for this. I really, really appreciate your time and what you're doing and who you are.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And we will connect. And when you're in New York, don't dodge me, or I'll stalk you. You know, I got to have my Brian Delate. You know, I said it right.
Yes, you did, brother. Yay!
All right, brother.
Okay.
Blessings to you, and we'll see you soon. And hey, thanks for joining us. And you know, you'll be seeing Brian again on Veteran, etc.
God bless.
Blessings to you.
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and/or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out cominghomewell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.